U.S. President Joe Biden met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House on Thursday, and Biden pressed for a ceasefire to the 9-month-old war in Gaza.
There are gaps that remain.
White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby said the administration was working to get both Israel and Hamas to agree to a ceasefire proposed by Biden that would halt fighting and see the release of Israeli hostages taken captive during Hamas's surprise attack on October 7th.
We want to get all the hostages home, clearly the Americans in particular. And that's why this deal is so important, Peter. And we are close. We are closer now, we believe, than we've been before.
Mr. President, we've known each other for 40 years.
The meeting marks the first face-to-face talks for the two men since Biden traveled to Israel days after Hamas's October attack, hugged Netanyahu, and pledged American support.
I want to thank you for 50 years of public service and 50 years of support for the state of Israel.
Netanyahu thanked Biden for his long-standing commitment to Israeli security. But relations between the two leaders have been strained for months over Israel's Gaza offensive, in which more than 39,000 people have been killed, according to health officials in Gaza. The Gaza conflict has caused cracks in the Democratic Party. Dozens of Democrats boycotted a speech by Netanyahu to Congress on Wednesday. Representative Rashida Tlaib sat in the gallery with a sign calling Netanyahu a war criminal. The U.S. is a major arms supplier to Israel. Biden took the rare step earlier this year of pausing the transfer of certain munitions it deemed inappropriate for warfare in the densely populated Gaza Strip. Netanyahu meets with Vice President and Democratic candidate Kamala Harris, and then on Friday travels to Florida to meet Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump.
From above, it's clear to see that Tyndall Air Base, set in remote shrubland of northern Australia, was designed as a small airfield with fast jets in mind. Now it's buzzing with new construction. The United States has quietly begun overhauling it, constructing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of facilities there to support B-52 bombers, F-22 stealth fighters, and refueling and transport aircraft. The expansion aims to help U.S. ally Australia project power into the South China Sea if any crisis erupts with Beijing. The Australian government also has its own program of new projects at Tyndall, spending $980 million US on hangars, a new airport terminal, and other facilities which are near completion. Fiona Pierce is a Royal Australian Air Force wing commander.
What we're moving towards is a multi-purpose base, so we're going to be big enough to take any aircraft in the world and to park and fly every different variant of aircraft. So there's runway increases, fuel increases, and a whole bunch of other facilities that are being worked on as well.
Australia is the top overseas location for U.S. Air Force and Navy construction spending under 2024 and 2025 U.S. congressional defense authorizations, totaling over $330 million. A few hundred miles north, a base in Darwin is also being upgraded with U.S. help. Tender documents show intelligence briefing rooms, runway upgrades, warehouses, and maintenance hangars are in the works. U.S. Marine Corps have routinely trained in Darwin since a 2011 agreement between Canberra and Washington. Commanding officer of the U.S. Marine Rotational Force, Colonel Brian Mulvihill, says that's now evolved into a regional deterrence role of about 2,000 Marines each year, and future upgrades to RAAF Darwin aim to support specific needs of the Marines.
The United States paid to have larger fuel storage put in place at RAAF Darwin in support of our aviation assets, as well as that's done, and then the next project is to expand the parking apron for the MV-22 Ospreys to give them more space in and around the busy airport that is Darwin and RAAF Darwin.
While remote locations pose challenges to sourcing materials and a workforce, Indigenous Australian residents also have complaints about the new developments. 75-year-old Tibby Quall is among several traditional owners who say growing demand for defense-related housing in Darwin has led to land clearing of forests they want protected, while rising prices have pushed Indigenous families out of the city. While U.S. and Australian officials say traditional owners can visit sacred sites on the base, Quall says his family has no real voice on how the land is used.
Disruption by climate activists had German politicians demanding better protection for the country's airports on Thursday. Activists were able to breach fences and disrupt air traffic for the second day in a row. The German Interior Minister, Nancy Faeser, criticised the blockades as dangerous, dumb and criminal, and lambasted airport operators for not securing their sites more effectively. Faeser wants to punish unauthorised airfield access with up to 2 years in jail. Traffic at Frankfurt Airport, Germany's busiest, was halted temporarily on Thursday after the activists blocked runways by gluing themselves to the tarmac. They said protesters were able to cut through a wire mesh fence to access the airport grounds. Their actions came a day after similar disruption affected Cologne-Bonn Airport. In Frankfurt, passenger Kira Meyer was on her way to Chicago when the activists struck.
To be honest, I don't think it's such a good idea. I think it's generally not the right way. I think there are other ways to get your opinion across somehow. And I think the aha effect that existed a year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, is somehow gone, completely gone. People are just annoyed by it now, and I don't think it has the meaning and purpose it had at the beginning.
The activists have vowed that the blockades are just the beginning of a campaign to exit oil, gas and coal by 2030. They have listed several countries across Europe and North America where disruptions are planned in the coming weeks. Similar actions had been attempted at other European airports, including London, Vienna, Oslo and Zurich, but they had been foiled by authorities. Fraport, the operator responsible for external protection, says there are more than 18 miles of regularly patrolled fencing at Frankfurt Airport, secured by technical systems. A source said Germany's Interior Ministry considers current protection standards insufficient, with a need for more resistant fences and modern signal and video systems. The source added that the ministry is coordinating better with the federal states on regulation to better protect German airports.
Anglo-Swedish drug maker AstraZeneca raised its full-year sales and profit forecast on Thursday. That's after beating analyst expectations for its second quarter revenue, thanks to strong demand for its cancer, rare disease and heart disease medicines. Sales in oncology, AstraZeneca's top business, grew almost 20% to over $5.3 billion. And its divisions for rare disease, heart and kidney disease also raked in double-digit growth. While the forecast-beating Q2 revenue hit almost $13 billion, analysts said it was dented by a rise in expenses and slightly softer sales of 2 cancer drugs. Despite this, AstraZeneca stated it expects both 2024 revenue and core earnings per share to increase by a mid-teens %. It was a similar story for fellow pharmaceutical giant Roche. The Swiss drug maker raised its full-year earnings on Thursday after its first-half operating profit exceeded expectations, driven by strong demand for newer drugs such as eye medicine Vabysmo. Revenue for this drug, which is used to treat a common form of blindness in elderly people, nearly doubled, beating estimates. Roche expects growth in adjusted earnings in the, quote, high single-digit range. Shares were up in afternoon trading, having hit a near one-year high earlier in the day.
Venezuela's presidential candidates made their final appeals to voters ahead of the country's election Sunday. President Nicolas Maduro, who has been in the job since 2013, is running for a third term. The 61-year-old who succeeded Hugo Chavez is confident he is still the right man to lead the OPEC country that has been governed by the socialists for a quarter of a century. His challenger is Edmundo Gonzalez, a 74-year-old former diplomat who has attracted significant support, drawing crowds of thousands. He was almost an unknown when he became the opposition alliance's last-minute candidate after Maria Corina Machado, the winner of its October primary, was barred from public office over alleged fraud which she denies. She has backed Gonzalez and has appeared at his side at several stops on the campaign trail. Maduro has loosened currency controls and curbed once sky-high inflation, but the economy remains stymied by a fall in oil income and enduring sanctions. He has warned of a, quote, bloodbath if the opposition wins, and has promised a new period of growth that will mean the economy will no longer depend on oil income. Gonzalez has appealed to Venezuelan voters' emotions, telling supporters that a change in government could motivate some of the more than 7.7 million migrants who have left the country to return. Gonzalez said Thursday he trusts the country's military will respect the will of the people. But other members of the opposition and some independent observers have questioned whether the vote will be fair, saying decisions by electoral authorities and the arrests of some opposition campaign staff are meant to create obstacles. Maduro has said the country has the world's most transparent electoral system. The United States and others have dismissed the 2018 re-election of Maduro as a sham. The U.S. urged Maduro's government to ensure that Sunday's election is competitive and inclusive.
The U.S. economy grew faster than expected in the second quarter, while inflation subsided. That's according to data from the U.S. Commerce Department on Thursday, which said gross domestic product increased at an annualized rate of 2.8% last quarter. It's higher than the average estimate of 2% from economists polled by Reuters, and double the 1.4% growth in the first quarter. Meanwhile, a key measure of inflation, called the Personal Consumption Expenditures, or PCE price index, rose 2.9%, down from 3.7% in the prior quarter. The steady growth and abating price pressures are likely welcome news for Federal Reserve officials ahead of their two-day policy meeting next week. The Fed aggressively raised interest rates since 2022 to curb inflation, a move some feared could tip the economy into recession. Despite the solid economic growth, the outlook for the second half of the year is hazy. Nonetheless, a recession is not expected, with monetary policy easing anticipated this year. Financial markets expect 3 rate cuts starting in September.
OpenAI is taking on Google with a new search engine. The artificial intelligence pioneer on Thursday announced the launch of SearchGPT. It's a prototype AI search engine and is only being tested with a small group of users and publishers. The best features from the search tool will later be incorporated into the ChatGPT chatbot. OpenAI says the product will provide summarized search results with links to source material. It's potentially a big threat to Alphabet-owned Google, which dominates the global search market. In June, it had a market share of over 91%. Alphabet shares closed 3% lower following the news. But the move could also put OpenAI on collision course with its own big backer, Microsoft, which operates the Bing search engine. The Windows maker has already adopted OpenAI tech for use by Bing. Meanwhile, Google recently rolled out AI-powered summaries. Another rival is the startup Perplexity, a search-focused chatbot backed by Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and AI chip champion NVIDIA.
North Korean balloons carrying trash have landed near South Korea's presidential office, the Presidential Security Service said on Wednesday. The objects in the balloons contained no contaminants or other risks, the Security Service said in a statement. It was not clear if President Yoon Suk-yeol was in the complex, located in the Yongsan area. Since May, North Korea has been sending hundreds of trash-filled balloons across the fortified border into South Korea. In response, South Korea's military resumed its loudspeaker broadcasts aimed at the north. The balloons have caused wider disruption and last month briefly halted operation at Incheon, the world's 5th busiest international airport and an important cargo hub. The North claims the balloon launches are retaliation against defectors and activists in the South who regularly send inflatables filled with anti-Pyongyang leaflets, food, medicine, money, and USB sticks loaded with K-pop videos and dramas.
S&P 500 and NASDAQ ended a bumpy session weaker on Thursday, failing to regain ground lost in the previous day's tech-triggered sell-off. The Dow added 0.2%, the S&P lost 0.5%, and the NASDAQ fell more than 0.9%. All 3 indexes were up for most of the session on the heels of stronger-than-expected second-quarter GDP data. Mega-cap stocks traded higher mid-afternoon, only to fall later in the day, with Meta platforms Microsoft and NVIDIA all ending lower. Lackluster earnings from both Tesla and Alphabet had pummeled Magnificent Seven stocks a day earlier, causing the S&P and NASDAQ to log their worst day since 2022. Alphabet shares dipped again on Thursday, falling 3% to the stock's lowest close since May 6th. but Tesla rebounded 2%. 4 more mega-cap tech companies report earnings next week. But while Brad Bernstein, managing director at UBS Private Wealth Management, called their results critical, it's the rest of the market he's excited about.
So we actually think the big story in earnings season this month will be the fact that for the first time in 2 years, we're going to have earnings growth in the non-Magnificent Seven of the S&P 500. So the 493 other stocks that have had no earnings growth as collectively over the last several years are finally going to have earnings growth. And we think that bodes very well for the rally to continue because earnings are now growing from other areas within the market.
Among earnings-driven moves, IBM shares jumped more than 4% after the tech company beat estimates for second quarter revenue and raised the annual growth forecast for its software business. Shares of American Airlines rose more than 4% after the company said it had taken swift action to reset its sales and distribution strategy, which had driven away corporate travelers. Meanwhile, shares of Southwest Airlines climbed 5.5% after saying it would end open seating on its flights. On the flip side, Ford shares plummeted more than 18% after the automaker's second quarter adjusted profit missed estimates by a wide margin.
Nissan slashed its annual outlook Thursday after reporting a 99% plunge in first quarter profits. That's as deep discounting in the US shredded the Japanese automaker's margins. Nissan's shares fell following the results, which were far short of analyst expectations. Operating profit for April to June was just $6.5 million. That was just a fraction of the roughly $1 billion profit predicted ahead of the results. It marks Nissan's worst quarterly performance in more than 3 years. While global sales remained even year-on-year at 787,000 vehicles, the profit from those sales was hit by an increase in discounts and marketing costs. That's as Nissan tried to ride out intense competition, particularly in the US. The automaker, which has struggled in the US, said sales were also hurt by an aging portfolio and a market shift to hybrid vehicles. However, the firm's CEO told Reuters that Nissan plans to bolster sales with fresh models in the second half of the year. Despite this, investors will now likely worry about the carmaker's outlook in the United States. That concern adds to Nissan's woes in China, where it has seen tough competition from domestic rivals. Shares in the company tumbled around 11% at one point, before finishing down 7%, their biggest one-day decline since February.
Mercedes-Benz has capped a tough week for big automakers. The German giant on Friday cut profit forecasts after weak sales and earnings in the second quarter. Like rivals, it's battling headwinds including lackluster demand for EVs and mounting competition in China. Supply bottlenecks and high interest rates also remain a drag. Mercedes reported a 6% drop in sales for the first half and a 17% plunge in sales of electric cars. The company said it now had a cautious view on China, where it expects fierce competition, particularly for its cheaper products. It was more hopeful about prospects in Europe and said it saw solid momentum in the US. Mercedes shares fell as much as 1.4% in early European trade following the news, but later recovered to trade flat. The wary outlook added to a tough week for the industry. Earlier, Japan's Nissan reported a 99% plunge in its first quarter profit after it was forced to do big discounts in the US. Ford shares tumbled 13% after it missed forecasts, citing quality-related problems and competition in the EV market. And Tesla stock sank too, after it also missed forecasts and saw profit margins sink to a 5-year low.
had plastic surgery, the speculation continues. Kendall Jenner's recent public appearance has once again set off a whirlwind of speculation about potential cosmetic enhancements. Last week, the 28-year-old model turned heads at the Gucci Miley Cyrus event at Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles. Sporting an all-black outfit, Kendall's sculpted physique and radiant appearance quickly became the talk of the town. Fans immediately took to Reddit, debating whether Kendall had undergone a breast augmentation. Kendall's face and curves seem different, one commenter noted. Another chimed in, "I'm about 90% certain she's had breast augmentation. Her breasts appear much fuller and lower than usual." The discussion heated up with more fans echoing the sentiment, "New boobs." This isn't the first time Kendall has faced plastic surgery rumors. Over the years, whispers about possible enhancements, including breast augmentation and lip fillers, have followed her. Despite the ongoing speculation, Kendall has consistently denied undergoing any significant procedures, attributing her evolving look to makeup, lighting, and natural body changes. Kendall's denials stand in contrast to her younger sister Kylie Jenner, whose cosmetic procedures have been more openly discussed. Kylie initially denied getting lip fillers, attributing her plumper pout to makeup tricks. However, as the speculation grew, she eventually admitted to having lip fillers, highlighting a pattern of initial denial followed by later admission within the Kardashian-Jenner family. This pattern has affected how the public perceives the family's transparency regarding cosmetic enhancements. While Kendall remains steadfast in her denial, the history of her family's admissions keeps fans scrutinizing her every appearance, comparing it to past photos, and speculating about possible procedures. So, has Kendall had work done, or is it all just makeup and natural changes? Only time will tell if she'll follow her family's trend of eventual admission, but for now, the mystery remains. As the Kardashian-Jenner clan continues to keep us guessing, one thing's for sure: in the world of Hollywood glam, speculation is always in fashion, because with the Kardashians, there's always more than meets the eye.
Ils sont rentrés dans la cour, ils ont défoncé les portails, défoncé les portes. Ils ont pris toutes mes choses, mes bijoux, mes habits, tout est parti. Le portable de mon enfant, l'ordinateur, tout est parti. Je ne sais pas si ils sont venus pour casser ou bien ils sont venus pour nous dépouiller. Donc voilà ça, nous sommes dans la désolation. On ne fait pas ça. On ne fait pas ça. Maintenant, ils sont venus casser là. Nous, demandez-leur, nous, on va où? On dort où? Nous, c'est tout ce que nous, on demande. Nous, on dort où? On n'a qu'à dormir dans la rue. On n'a qu'à dormir dans la rue.
Nous, on se disait que c'est un petit centimètre qu'ils avaient demandé qu'ils allaient prendre. Mais à nos surprises, ils ont débordé par rapport à ce qu'on pensait. Vous voyez, non? Vraiment, c'est catastrophe. C'est catastrophe. On ne peut pas tout dire, mais on a perdu beaucoup de choses.